Joy's going to tell us about these daffodils here, and then she's going to tell us about her ex-husband.
Are you ready? Okay. Those daffodils there, and the daffodils over there. And there's a group of daffodils on the north side of the cottage. We're sitting in front of the cottage. On the north side of the cottage. And I planted all of those daffodils 2 years ago, actually. And Honey was with me. Our dog Honey was with me when we planted them. And I knew that Honey was not going to be around in the spring because she had cancer and it was definitely terminal. And so I told Honey that even though she wouldn't be here to see them, that every time that I saw the daffodils that came up in the spring, I would think of her. And I have. So those are Honey's daffodils. And that's Small Dog. Okay, let me talk a little bit about my ex-husband. I was married before, of course, and my ex-husband was quite a character. Let's see, where to start? We got married in 1966, April of 1966, and moved into student housing. My ex-husband was 3 years older than me, 3 years older than me, and so he graduated in December of '66. And got a job as a probation officer in January. But those were the days of the draft, and so he had worked a little under 3 months for the probation department when he got his draft notice because he was 1A, and they said come in and report, and he declined to do that, and so instead he quit his job and packed up his belongings and headed for Canada, which a lot of young men did in those days who did not want to be shipped off to Vietnam. And so I tried to talk him out of it. After all, my dad was career Air Force, so I was fairly pro-military. And I also was concerned about the effect it would have on him for the future. But had a big argument, but anyway, he went to Canada. So he had a really difficult time in Canada because there was no one wanted to hire him, and he had no money. And anyway, it was very difficult for him, and after about 6 months he ran out of money and everything else, and so he came back and went down to the military, and they took him back, and I guess enough people had done that they kind of let bygones be bygones, and so he went into the military as a private or whatever it is, the lowest rank you can be, and was promptly shipped off to Vietnam. So his job classification in Vietnam, he was a radio operator, which meant that he would go into combat without even a weapon. He would just be carrying a radio backpack on his back. And so he didn't realize it at the time, but very soon did realize it, that he was a primary target for snipers because, of course, they wanted to take out the radio. So he got shot at a lot. And so as quickly as possible, he arranged a transfer to another job classification, which was combat photographer. And that wasn't a lot better because now he was taking a camera rather than a radio, but he still didn't have a weapon. And so after he did that for a while, he managed to get transferred into, I don't know what exactly the job classification was, but he worked in the photo lab, and he would print up the different pictures and the reconnaissance material and so forth that was shot over there. So so he did that for his tour over there.
He got a Purple Heart, didn't he?
Yeah. He said he got a Purple Heart. I'm not sure if that actually was true or not, but the very first, it's like a 36-hour flight from San Francisco to Vietnam, and so he got there to Cu Chi. He was stationed in Cu Chi, and he got there, and he was absolutely exhausted and crawled into his bunk and promptly went to sleep and was awoken that night by people shouting, "Incoming, incoming." And so he sat up quickly in the bunk, hearing explosions and everything else around him, and totally disoriented because he had just gotten to Vietnam. Sat up so quickly that he gave himself a gash right on the forehead right here, and almost knocked himself out. But anyway, basically spent the rest of the episode of the shooting and everything in the bunk. And according to him, because he was wounded in combat, he was awarded a Purple Heart for that. So, given some of the things that went on in the Vietnam War, that would not surprise him in the least. So, anyway, he did his tour of duty, eventually got out of the military, and came back to Riverside, California, which is where I was living, and I was living in a house on Franklin Street in Riverside. It was 3352 Franklin. I remember it was an old house, a two-story house, kind of an interesting layout. And it was kind of a rough neighborhood. There was a guy stabbed to death just up the block from us on Franklin, so it gives you an idea of what it was like. But he came back a couple of weeks, and he and his brother, and I think that Dan Boers went with them too, decided to go on a camping trip. And so Douglas came back from Vietnam somewhat paranoid about people shooting and things like that. And so he insisted before he left that he got me a gun, a big gun, a .357 Magnum, huge thing. And we went shooting, and he emphasized to me that, especially since this individual had been killed up the street, that I should really be sure that I knew how to use the gun and not hesitate to use it and so forth. And he said that, if you hear anybody creeping around the house or anything like that, don't hesitate, just blow their heads off. Okay. So he and the two others went on a camping trip, and they were gone, and I'm upstairs in the house, and I should perhaps explain the layout of the house, because the whole upstairs was one big room, and you accessed it by a staircase that came right up to the middle of the room, and the bed was up against the window and faced the staircase, and there was a window on the landing of the staircase that backlit the staircase, and so somebody would come up the staircase, and you'd see them like ships coming over the horizon. You'd see first their head, then their shoulders, and as they came up the stairs. So anyway, so I'm sound asleep, and I hear this noise downstairs. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what is that? My ex-husband was right. I was my ex-husband at the time. I was thinking, Douglas was right. There's somebody creeping around downstairs. And so I reached under the bed, got my gun out, sat up in bed, got myself, situated with the gun. And I thought, the backlighting is great. It was a moonlit night. Whoever it is, when his head comes above the first step, I'll pull the trigger. And so, sure enough, somebody was creeping around, and they started coming up the stairs very slowly. And when they got up to the landing and their head was backlit, I pulled the trigger. However, it was my ex-husband who had neglected to inform me that he had got tired of being on a camping trip and had come home early. And I almost killed him. As it was, the bullet missed. He apparently heard me cocking the weapon or whatever it is that you do, and he dropped, and the bullet went right through the window. And he was shocked and surprised, and I don't remember what happened next, except I think that he was not happy, but as I pointed out to him, it was his own fault. But the end result of that was that the next day our neighbor, a neat black guy, said, came up to us and said, "Things okay at your house?" I said, "Sure, you're fine." And the bullet hole that broke the window just went right through the window, and we just left it and didn't do anything to it about it. And so I don't know what the landlord thought when we left, but that was that. So anyway, eventually we got a divorce. So that was my ex-husband.
That's why I tell people you try to kill your ex-husband.
Well, I didn't do it on purpose.
No, but it makes for a good. It's a great headline for a story. Thank you for your contribution.
You're quite welcome.